Hey everybody, Michael from RogueDeckBuilder.com here, doing another Deck Tech Doctor video. And so this is a mill deck. This deck is brought to us by Eduardo Tovar on YouTube. Thank you for sending in your deck. I love mill. I have yet to make my own mill deck, but there are many mill decks out there, and this one actually looks like it is quite well built. I'm actually pretty impressed by this. I think it could do some work, and I think it only can go up from here. From the score, it looks like people like it as well, and it looks like from the comments, Eduardo has been, pretty on top of things. So this one, I actually don't have too much advice for because it seems like Eduardo is doing quite well with this one. I think most of what I'm going to be suggesting is just personal things. If it were me building this type of deck, changes that I would do. That's generally how these episodes go, anyways. And people who send me their decks, they're always free to ignore my suggestions, take them in, think about them, whatever they want to do. I'm just here to sort of give another eye on top of things. So this is a mill control deck, Demir, as you can see, black blue. Or blue-black, whatever way you want to put it. A lot of what I would change mostly is just number count on some of the cards. For example, four Far and Away and 4 Devour Flesh. I'm not 100% sure I agree with that. That's not. I think I would probably knock it down to maybe 2 Far Away and 3 Devour Flesh to make room for some other things. Main reason, I know that there's a huge emphasis on removal and stuff like that, but it is nice to make a little bit more room, I think, for a little bit more utility type stuff. Like I would like a second Cyclonic Rift possibly, or maybe adding in some other cards that I'm going to be suggesting. But I don't think you need 4 Far and Aways and 4 Devour Flesh. I think that seems like a bit much. I know with certain cards, it gets around indestructible, hexproof, stuff like that. But I don't think overloading on those types of effects is always, the way to go. You're going to be milling them and having a little bit more ways to focus on that. I think it is a little bit better, is a little bit more the way to go. One thing I noticed is this deck might consider another win condition. Just because milling, I find milling to be a little bit of a hit or miss sometimes. If you mill them and they end up drawing the right answer right away or something like that, and it's really hard to find that balance between, okay, do I want a really controlled type mill, or do I just want to go full out aggressive mill, fill my deck with just a whole bunch of mill type cards and consuming aberrations and stuff like that. And it's a little bit of a tough balance, and so I think testing's the only way to get there. Eduardo seems to have tested a little bit with it and seems to have pretty solid results. I would maybe add a second Mind Grind. Even if you don't use one just as a finale type mill, even Mind Grinding for 3 or something in the middle of the game can have quite a heavy hit on them, depending on where their lands are placed, of course. But it's always nice, of course, to keep count of those lands when you're playing a deck with Mind Grind in it, just so you can find the optimal amount of lands to pay for X. Pilfered Plans, I like as a sort of a card draw. I would maybe possibly test with something like Read the Bones. Read the Bones is same cost. It's a little bit easier to cast as well if you end up somehow stuck on blue mana by turn 3. But the scry is extremely useful, and other than let's see, the 4 Temple of Deceits you have no way of scrying in your deck. And in a control deck, scrying is extremely useful, and it'll draw you 2 cards just the same, but you'll get the addition of controlling those draws, and in 2 turns that can be extremely important. The 2 life is pretty irrelevant, especially if you're running a couple of Crypt Incursions, because even 4 creatures gets you so much life back, or 3 creatures gets you enough life back to pay for those Read the Bones. One reason I would think to just sort of maybe play 2 Pilfered Plans and 2 Read the Bones is because Pilfered Plans, I don't think the difference of milling them out is going to be between 2 cards or not. I find that it's going to be very rare. And I think having the consistent advantage of having Read the Bones is a little bit better than running just a full set of Pilfered Plans. Because, with cards like Jace and everything like that, you're either going to be milling them by a bunch, or with Mind Grind, you're just going to mill them out instantly. I find there aren't going to be as many circumstances where you mill them to a point where a Pilfered Plans is going to win you the game. I don't feel that in a mill deck that's going to be happening. So I would say Read the Bones would be a little bit better. You can test with 1 Read the Bones, 3 Pilfered Plans, or test with all Read the Bones and no Pilfered Plans. But I would suggest trying out Read the Bones. I really like it in these types of lists where you really want certain turns where you're looking for answers or something like that. I mean, you could possibly even try running Underworld Connections, but I'm not sure if I agree with that one as much, because more and more people are running Enchantment Hate, and there's Detention Spheres and everything like that, and Read the Bones gets around that a little bit. So, let's see, what else? Not much just to say. I mean, the list looks pretty solid to me. I mean, again, it's mostly just number counts. Now, speaking of like other win conditions, you might consider just trying Duskmantle Guildmage. This would be just more me trying to make this card work. I'm trying to make a deck where Duskmantle Guildmage works, and I find like if you have Duskmantle Guildmage and Jace Memory Adept out, it makes a 0. Pretty much a 2-turn clock if you have them both out on the field. So, and if you're keeping the opponent's board clean and stuff like that, and they don't have any way to remove Duskmantle, it's a turn 2 clock essentially. So I don't know. It's might be a card to test out. I don't know if it'll work. It probably won't, but one can hope. That's just more my personal flavor. One last card I'm going to suggest is actually Whelming Wave. Now, this is a card I actually really like, and I actually run it in my blue-white control deck as a 5th Wrath. I know it's not actually a Wrath, but for all intensive purposes, it pretty much is. When I've drawn it, it has saved me, a bunch of times when I've drawn it, and reason being is because no one really plays Krakens, Leviathans, Octopods, or Serpents. It essentially clears the whole board and buys you at least a turn, if not 2, for them to rebuild. So it does buy you the time, and especially with a mill deck, when a lot of turns come down to you only need 1 or 2 turns to mill them out or something like that, those 1 or 2 turns that Whelming Wave can buy you is extremely prevalent. So that's why I think this deck doesn't have any way to board wipe other than Bile Blight if they are running a ton of weenies or something like that. But other than that, especially with the resurgence of decks such as like of green-red monsters and Jund monsters and stuff like that, where their threats are so large, and unless you have the spot removal to remove them, even leaving 1 up can possibly kill you. So using Whelming Wave as just sort of a pseudo way to board wipe and buy you a turn or 2 can be actually really, really relevant, I think in a mill deck, and it's something that I would definitely run. So even knocking down 1 Far and Away and 1 Devour Flesh to run those things, I think is actually a pretty solid suggestion, and it's probably the most serious one I would consider, just because I think having access to a board wipe would make this deck really, really strong, or much stronger than it is. It's quite hard to judge mill decks because I find they're a little bit random in their performances. But yeah, that's pretty much all I would suggest. Honestly, the list looks pretty solid, and you can obviously, Eduardo has put quite a bit of time into this and tested it and stuff like that. So that's mainly the reason why I don't have too many suggestions, because honestly, there's not many other things that I would change. Mostly just number count and maybe a couple of additions here and there, such as Whelming Wave. But yeah, that's definitely something to consider. Sideboard wise, not really sure what else I would suggest. Oh, one thing to know, I would actually main deck Thoughtseize. Honestly, it's one of the best cards in Standard right now, and even making room for 3 or 4 of them in your main deck. Again, the life loss is irrelevant when you have Crypt Incursions and you're milling them for enough. You can regenerate that much. You can regenerate the life loss from that and Read the Bones quite easily with Crypt Incursion. So Thoughtseize, I think, is just too strong not to include in the main board, honestly. and yeah, again, it's just such a solid card. I really like it, and it can set up the pace of the whole game. You know, if you have it in your opening hand, or at least you're in your early draws, and it can definitely protect you from threats that hit the board where it's a little bit harder for you to deal with. So that is something to consider. You know, cards such as Blood Baron and stuff like that. I see that, you know, if they have any other creature up, it prevents you from Devour Flushing them, or if they're playing Mutavaults or something like that, Devour Flush and Far and Away are a little bit less effective, I guess is the way to put it. And you know, Blood Baron can probably do some work against you if it has some staying power. So, including some cards like Thoughtseize, where it gets rid of those threats before they can actually hit the board. You know, if you don't have your counters up or anything like that, you know, those are things to consider, and those are things to test out. I mean, it really depends on what you're playing against. I really don't know your meta or what you're playing against the most, but I just really like Thoughtseize as a card, and it's just arguably one of the strongest cards in Standard right now. So something to consider. But other than that, like I said, excellent list. Really looking forward to seeing how it updates and how it grows. Honestly, the best suggestion I would probably have is Whelming Wave. Honestly, it's just, I think it really fits in this deck, and I think it could help it a lot, especially against those creature matchups. But that's all I have for this episode. Thank you, Eduardo, for sending in your deck. Again, for any of you guys who have played mill decks and stuff like that, definitely feel free to leave your own suggestions in the comments below, and I'm sure Eduardo will get a look at them when he takes a look at this video. Make sure to check out roguedeckbuilder.com for some great articles and things like that, as well as keep sending in your decks. I am definitely looking forward to seeing more decks. But until then, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching.